Introduce myself. I'm Curtis Walser. They call me Wally, so the name gets interchanged. I'm a full-time captain paramedic with the Cedar Rapids Fire Department, and then I'm also the communications manager for Iowa Task Force 1, which is the state urban search and rescue asset. We have the Cedar Rapids Division and the Sioux City Division. We come together to form one task force that's dispatched by the governor's office and state homeland security. So we basically I do this day in and day out, and then but we also cover all of Iowa. A little bit about how I got here. I started as a volunteer firefighter at age 18. Thought I was going to be an airline pilot. At age 21, I decided that firefighting was a better career choice. I got hired by the Cedar Rapids Fire Department, and I couldn't stand the downtime on nights, weekends, and holidays. I had to play with technology and learn new items, and so it just kind of blossomed from there. In addition to that, I'm also a credentialed COM-L and COM-T here in the state. I'm also a COM-L and COM-T instructor for the state. There's 3 of us in the state, some of you know me from those venues, and so I do a lot of communication related training as well as work on it operationally. I'm not sponsored by a vendor. I'm not here to sell any brand of products. I genuinely come from an environment where back in Lynn County in the city of Cedar Rapids, we're a Harris user, a Harris P25 Phase 1 system that rolled out in 2014. But as a task force member and as a statewide asset, we're going to be a heavy Motorola user for the on the ISICS system. So I'm not here to sell any one product or any one brand, but I'm here today to talk about control stations. It wasn't the last board meeting, it was the board meeting before. The board is applying for a grant to purchase control stations to put in all of the PSAPs in Iowa. And is it 119? Is that the right number?
I think
113? Oh, okay, sorry, I don't have the number committed to memory, but they're looking at, that way there's an option. So even if you're not using the ISICS system, you still have connectivity to the ISICS system, because remember the #1 plan was interoperability. And so people have asked, even on our use, so I'm not a board member, I sit on 5 of the subcommittees for the board, and even in the technology committee, I'm with Rob Dennert. Actually, Rob, you're in about 3 of the 5, I think, along with me. Even in the technology committee, there was some question about what do we mean by control station? What do we mean by when we say Consulate? So I was asked, can I just do a little breakdown, define some of these radio terms, and then talk about a little bit about what the control station could provide if you choose to use it. First thing, so the terminology. Obviously this is a portable radio. Sometimes they call walkie-talkie, but the technical term is portable. This would be the low power, battery operated, you carry around with you, goes on your belt. This is a mobile radio. Mobile being that it would normally go in a vehicle, it'd be powered by the vehicle's electrical system, and it is generally going to be higher power with better antenna on it, right? We're going to put a nicer antenna on the vehicle generally, better range. So when we say mobile radio or mobile radio coverage, we are talking about this style. Now this is just one model and one brand, I'm just using as an example, but this would be something that could be mounted on the dash of the vehicle or in a console in the vehicle, or could be remotely mounted. This radio head part where you actually change channels, this can be removed and mounted up where the driver operator sits, and the rest of this RF deck or brick, sometimes it's called, could go in the back. But that's mobile radio. What a control station then is kind of a marriage of this mobile radio with a power supply to supply that you could plug into the wall. So when we talk about a control station, basically it's a mobile radio that you could use inside a building, inside a structure. So you're synthetically powering it. You don't see a 12-volt car battery sitting around here. You would be used with some form of a power device. Lastly then, you talk about base stations and repeaters. That's something completely different. Those are higher power. A lot of times the hardware's right at the tower site. It's hooked to those big spools of cable that Melvin mentioned at the end of his presentation. So that would be more of the base station repeaters. So today we're focusing on the control station. And I've got a couple of examples here of control stations. These two are older models. They're ones that we carry with the task force if we go out the door. But basically right here, here's a power supply on the bottom. The wire's connected to a mobile radio that's slid in the top. Add a speaker so you can hear and a microphone so you can talk. I can take this anywhere I want to go, and all I need is some form of antenna. And this just happens to be a magnetic mount antenna. Now, you want some clearance from people. You wouldn't want it sitting right next to you, obviously, but that's how portable or transportable it is. This is the same thing. This is a Motorola XTL Consulate. The Consulate, it's just a housing. There's a mobile radio inside and the power supply. So if you hear the term a Consulate is a control station, but not every control station is a Consulate. Does that make sense? We're talking bandage versus Band-Aid. Consulate is a term that Motorola uses to describe their control station. Harris makes control stations. The CS7000, if you wanted to Google, it looks very similar to what's sitting up here, a little bit, some differences. All of the major manufacturers all have their respective version. So, in the here and now then, this is the APX 7500 Consulate, and this is an APX 8500. This would be just considered a control station. This is just a mobile radio, like we said, that would go in a vehicle, a desk-style microphone so that it sits and looks prettier than the hand mic that you see right here. And then your speaker unit is in the bottom. I believe that the goal for the grant is to purchase the full Consulate. And I think the last tech committee meeting, wasn't that our final recommendation? And the reason for that, I'm going to use this one as an example here. On the back side, you see a number of connections, different styles of connections. So we said it'll do the basic functions: audio in, audio out, push to talk. But you can take this one step further, and with the circuitry that's in the Consulate, you can interface it to different devices. Maybe you need a logging recorder. Maybe you need maybe you use Zetron radio consoles. You don't use Motorola radio consoles, but you still want connectivity. You can take audio in, audio out, push to talk with these various interfaces and interface it to your console equipment so your dispatcher is looking at the same screen and the same feel and the same format. I don't know about your PSAP. At ours, sometimes change can be difficult, and so to change the whole layout can sometimes cause more problems and more fear against using the equipment. This way you can keep everything with the same look and feel that you have and interface it to this type of device. Now, these also have interface points, even a mobile radio. You can do interoperability. If any of you folks have heard of or have an ACU, ACU 1000, ACUT, ICRI, all these buzzwords for the little black box that connects different radios together, okay, you can do that with both of these. That's just a different style of connection and something that you set up ahead of time. The radio that's inside would be issued a user ID on the ISICS system. And those interoperability talk groups that were in the last couple slides of Melvin's presentation would then be all available and could be all loaded into the radio that's in here, making it available for your use depending on where you go. What this device also offers is some different ways to interface. Unfortunately, I don't have, this is a flat face plain model here. They make a model that has this radio face mounted in the front, so that you can still change channels, adjust volume. It'll work as a standalone unit. One of the other advantages is, I don't know if you have a a bailout plan for your PSAP. If you have a large county fair or event where you set up a forward command post, these could be removed. So you could have this sitting on your desk in your PSAP. You could have it sitting in a tray back in the back room, interfaced to your console. But if you had to get out quick and you needed that interoperability, really all you got to do is unplug the connections, unhook the antenna, have in your bailout kit a separate mobile antenna that you can hook up, and you can take that and go anywhere. So you've got the point being is that you've got options. So assume if the grant goes through, there's an opportunity for basically a low cost or no cost solution. You may have some cost, I would assume, if you were going to interface it into your equipment, but as a standalone it would function. Or here's the thing, even if you left it turned off and sitting in the closet, it's still available to you if you choose to use it or the need or emergency arises. And that was my understanding. I don't want to speak for the board, but that was my understanding from the presentation that was given at the ISICS board meeting when they were talking about going for the grant. It has all the same capabilities that are present in a mobile or portable, encrypted groups. It can have your operational talk groups if you're an operational user. It'll have your interop groups. It can do analog, and then based on how it's configured, what frequency bands, I believe this one here does 7800 and VHF, and I would assume that that would be my recommendation for the configuration that they seek. So you've got multiple interoperability platforms that are built into the unit, and it's transportable. Some people asked about costs. Again, not a salesperson. Landon could speak more to that. As a budgetary pricing, you're looking at somewhere of the $7,000, $7,500 probably, give or take, to looking at maybe $10,000 if you were going to go and add these desk sets are just another way again to interface. So you normally have the radio head. This could be sitting on somebody's desk and connected to this unit. There's a push to talk and a standard earpiece that controls the radio. Obviously, this adds cost to the configuration, but that may be the style of configuration that you need in your specific environment or your PSAP. But you're probably, I'm going to guess budgetarily, you're going to be in the $10,000 range. It's just like a vehicle. You can get the standard manual windows and door locks. You can get the XM radio, satellite radio, and OnStar. You're going to pay a little more for those options. I'm not sure that the actual all options have been decided yet as part of the grant. I think the first step was apply for the grant, given a budgetary figure of what the units cost, and then proceed from there and zero it in once we get positive confirmation that the grant's awarded. Chair Lampe asked me also to talk about the levels of users. So ISICS has 4 levels of users, level 1, 2, 3, and 4. Level 1 would be interoperability only. So you've got the interop talk groups only. Maybe you're a VHF user in your native county that you're at. All you want that for is if you have to interoperate with state entities or other entities that are existing ISICS users. Again, no cost. There's no dispatch consoles that you have to install. There's no infrastructure you have to add. You basically plug it in and connect an antenna. And I should mention that antenna doesn't have to be that magnetic antenna I have here. If your building has a managed antenna system that gets your RF outside of your building, it can easily be adapted to the antenna connections on the back. Level 2 user then would be interoperability and perhaps seeking a dispatch console of some kind on the system. But again, no infrastructure and limited operational users. So that device would work for both of those levels, depending on what fits for you. Those were the basic points that I was asked to cover. If you were looking for a PowerPoint with a lot of text on it, sorry to disappoint you. I don't do those. That's just not my cup of tea. I'm way more into the hands-on and the actual pieces of hardware. So I guess I'd like to see what What questions do you have? Maybe I didn't clarify, or maybe I didn't state something real clear. What can I answer for you in terms of the control station concept?
Just to
Sir.
touch base a little bit more on level 2, level 3, level 4.
Okay.
I'll use myself for an example. We have Zetron councils in our PSAP.
Mm-hmm.
There's going to be a state tower on, right? I mean, outside the door of our facility.
Mm-hmm.
So when you talk about this, what does that provide that, like, the Zetron council, I mean, doesn't already have built in? If I want to use it for operability and interoperability, both, I mean,
Right.
what is that something that is already, I mean, talked down to me?
Sure.
I'm sorry.
No. Very good question. Your Zetron consoles, as they sit, don't have any RF. They don't have any radio wave. They're like an audio management. They're the radio head, if you will. Right.
Yeah, and let's say you had a whatever in the back, Kenwood,
right,
in the back, or however you want it. Is that necessary in order for that to work off of that tower?
If your Kenwood radio was 700 megahertz capable, was able to talk in P25 phase 2, right, and was, I'm going to put in air quotes, type accepted on the ISICS system, because we don't really have a type acceptance policy, but I know it's coming, then theoretically you wouldn't need this. You could program the user ID that you were given for interoperability into your Kenwood radio, routed into your Zetron console. Then absolutely, my understanding is.
I mean, then if the grant goes through, it'd be a backup.
Yep.
In case that stuff goes down.
Absolutely. And my feeling would be, again, I don't write the rules, but I would argue for that autonomy at your local level. So if you say, hey, I want to keep this in the box and I don't want to ever touch it unless there's a problem, I mean, once in a while you should test it and update it, of course, but I think as a local, you should have that autonomy to make that decision. If you wanted it running on the desk so it's powered and ready to go as a backup, again, your decision. If you wanted it interfaced along with your Kenwood equipment, you should have that option also.
Not to, I mean, go into the vendor jargon here, but does that Motorola give any more benefit in that connection between, I mean, is there any more capability with that unit versus vendor to vendor?
Yes. There will always be what I like to call the technology special sauce. So we've got the P25 standard, but every manufacturer's system, and married with their version, their branded radio, you're going to get all of the basics and everything you need, but you're always going to get a chunk of extra that I call the special sauce that comes on top. So one of those examples would be, you hear the word OTAP. That's over-the-air programming. So basically, rather than having to hook a computer to this radio, I can shoot the program over through RF over the air. Saves you time. You don't have to call your deputy in. He or she doesn't have to come off the line. It saves time. It's not efficient, but on a couple radio basis, that can save time for you. You can do that with your Motorola. You're not going to be able, at least at this time, you're not going to be able to OTAP that Kenwood radio off of the Motorola infrastructure. So that would be one of those examples.
There's no standards in regards to that Motorola working with that Harris or vice versa. It's vendor specific.
Yeah, only for specific things like call setup, like a voice call, there is a standard everybody's supposed to meet. So your radios can talk.
Talk over options.
Yep.
Yeah, okay.
OTAR is the over-the-air rekeying, so those encryption keys that scramble the voice. That does work across manufacturers. And I'm a living example. We were one of the first in Lynn County to OTAR a Motorola radio with a Harris KMF, or key management computer that's on the system. So that's an example of one that you want to test, you want to verify it, but that would be a feature that may be defined in the standard and would cross-platform function, but some of those extra ones would not. So yes, you're right. You're always going to gain some satellite features. I guess you have to make the determination of is my reason for going with brand X worth not having those extra features. And some of that will probably be written into policy. I think we're still a little infancy stages on some of the policy yet, but
Thank you.
yeah. Sir.
If you have multiple positions within a PSAP, do you need multiple units, one per position, or is it one per PSAP?
I believe the intent of the grant is to provide one piece of hardware per PSAP. So to answer your question, in the case like with these desk sets, I believe it's a fairly large number, but you can add multiple. So you could put one of these at each position if you like, tied to one single RF unit, either in your equipment room or sitting on the desk. The drawback would be is this can only be tuned into one talk group at a time. You could scan. Scanning may or may not be ideal depending on how it's hooked up. I don't think I'd be on scan if I was just seeing it as a tile on a radio console, because depending on how you programmed it, where you're going to transmit wherever the scan lands or wherever you're parked. So that would be the drawback. If you wanted independent talk groups for, let's say you had a law enforcement dispatcher and a fire EMS dispatcher, and they were both going to have to be on separate talk groups, you'd need one of these black boxes for each talk group you'd want to be on at a time. Or you'd have to change back and forth, and then you're going to run the risk of missing traffic.
But if I could, Wally, but for interoperability only, if you were a smaller PSAP, like we're a two-position PSAP, we already, we have basically control stations that run our ops channels and switch between repeaters, and we run one transmitter for both positions. So it can be done. It just depends on how much functionality you want.
You can get really creative. One thing that I kind of specialized in was looking at all of the options that when you boot up the software, you load up the software to program any one of these devices, looking at how are those different configurations and what are your options. And I found that the workflow, what discipline, I've worked in fire and EMS exclusively. Any law enforcement experience has been ride time and just working side by side and asking them, hey, what do you need to do your job and what would make it easier? There are so many options for configuration. If you get the right person that knows the product and knows all those options and can ask the right questions of the end user, you can a lot of times work through, as Jason was saying, you can work through some of those dependencies in order to get what you need. The key is finding that vendor or that technician that knows all those options. So, but. Yeah, if you're like, it's mission critical, I have to be on more than one group, it's more than one box. And I believe you can interface, though, more than one box. You can network them all together, so any one location can use any one of the boxes. So you could have 3 consoles. 2 of the consoles are on one talk group and 1 of the consoles are on the other, and they're all on separate desk sets. So there's ways to build a network and a network of options. I toured a facility over in Illinois, and they had 8 of these in a rack. Each one was fixed on one talk group. You couldn't change the group. But then they had these desk sets throughout their facility. So each one can select any one of those 8 at any one time. Does that make sense?
Yes.
All right. Well, thank you. Hopefully we got your questions